Hi everyone, it's Kirby here. Welcome back to my channel, Kirby Scribbles. Today I decided I'm going to do a sit-down story time, and I'm going to talk about the time I was announced at my congregation under public reproof. Many of you know that I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm no longer a Jehovah's Witness, and I was actually announced at my congregation twice. But I'm going to talk about the first time I got announced under public reproof. Now, I was not baptized at the time. I didn't get baptized until September of 2015, I believe it was. I was an unbaptized publisher, and when you have privileges in the congregation and a situation happens, you have to make the elders aware of it, and so that's what happened. If you're like a Jehovah's Witness that is following the rules, you go snitch on yourself basically and tell them, ooh, like I had sex out of marriage, or I've been drinking a lot and I'm like a borderline alcoholic, or I'm an alcoholic, or I was smoking weed, or I was doing this, some type of sinful act, and you kind of take yourself to the elders and, tell on yourself, because they instill a lot of guilt and shame on people when you experiment with certain things. And there's other times where a person may not go telling themselves, but say another Jehovah's Witness found out that you were doing something and you committed a sin, or doing something that could lead you into sin, then another Jehovah's Witness will tell on you. So that wasn't my situation. I went to the elders and I told them what happened. I want to kind of give a little bit of backstory. I had moved from the Midwest down to the South, and I also grew up with a disorder called Trichotillomania. It's a certain type of OCD disorder, and it's a slight form of Tourette's, where I actually pull out my hair. My main problem area is the hair from my scalp. So I'm mentioning that because that kind of played into my interactions with my fellow peers who were my age as Jehovah's Witnesses and in school as well. And I was not homeschooled. I went to public school throughout my entire life. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that I knew were homeschooled, especially back in the Midwest. I didn't know too many here in the South, in the area I was living in, that were homeschooled. But it was kind of common that down here was more like, okay, once they got done with middle school, maybe freshman or sophomore year, they would stop going to public school and they would do homeschool and just get their GED. That's what I was kind of noticing a lot down here, where it was like a mix back up in the Midwest. So growing up with that disorder and growing up a Jehovah's Witness, I was socially awkward. I also was sheltered to a degree. Just the type of person that I am anyway, just my initial blueprint. I just marched to the beat of my own drum. I was not a super girly girl. I like to play outside, build forts, climb trees. I swam, and I was doing arts and crafts. I was not the girl playing Barbie. I was not the type of girl that cared about getting married. How some young girls are like, oh, I can't wait to get married and my wedding's going to be like this. And, I did have some friends or associates that would have those type of conversations. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. I was just not that type of girl. And was I interested in guys? Yes. But, not obsessive like some girls can be. I was different. I was weird. I was awkward. And I had the disorder. And I looked unsightly a lot of times because I didn't know how to do my hair, and my parents didn't know what was going on with me. And I went to several different doctors, and they had no idea what it was. So I actually ended up diagnosing myself, and the internet was still kind of new, and Google wasn't even the main search engine that was used back then. It was Ask Jeeves. And I literally typed in, why do I pull my hair out? And it was an article from this woman in the UK that basically said that she was doing it, and it's called Trichotillomania. And that's how I found out what I had. And I just kind of did my research from there, and I ended up diagnosing myself. My interaction with individuals were sometimes off-putting, and people were kind of like, oh, she's weird, you know. And like also too, like if you ever notice, if you're around a person who has a disability, like they're in the wheelchair or they have some type of disformity, a lot of people don't go flocking to them. You know, they kind of like, you know, say their highs and byes, and they're nice, people are nice to them, or they kind of get avoided. And I got a good sense of that, you know. And how I am now and how I look at my appearance, I don't get that. But if I was to take this wig off and people were to see my real hair and the way that it is, I wouldn't get the type of interactions that I would get looking like this, okay? Because I looked a bit unsightly. I wasn't clicking and meshing well with some of the girls and the other like kids my age at my new congregation. But I did befriend two girls at my congregation. One I'm going to name is Ashley, and one I'm going to name is La Cienega. La Cienega was also new to the congregation, and she moved from out of state as well. And Ashley, she was born and raised here in the South. I was also hanging out with another girl who I'm going to name as Giggles, and she went to a different congregation at the same Kingdom Hall. So we crossed paths because of a Kingdom Hall remodeling that we had to do. So we had our Kingdom Hall building, but it needed to be remodeled. So all the people from all the congregations got together and helped with the remodeling process. And so that's how I met Giggles. And so Giggles and I and Ashley and I would hang out a lot. La Cienega didn't really mesh well with Giggles. So I was kind of ping-ponging between the three of them, but you know, Giggles and Ashley were pretty chill, but Ashley was a bit younger, just like a grade younger, I think, if not 2 grades under us. And Giggles and I were both, we were only a month apart actually. After the breakup with my high school boyfriend, who was also like a half in, half out Jehovah's Witness, basically I was like heartbroken. I also wasn't getting along well with my parents. So growing up in a strict religion and having strict parents or a strict parent, you don't just have to have both parents as being strict, but one of my parents was definitely strict to a degree, not necessarily in the religious way, but like just strict in general. And if you're a person like in the Black community, you kind of know what I mean, how Black parents can be, that kind of thing. I already felt some type of way about myself because I felt like I wasn't pretty because of my hair situation, and just a lot of different things, just like the growing pains of growing up as a teenager, that kind of thing. Giggles felt like really bad about what I was going through. She had a car and she was willing to like pick me up and go do stuff. Also too, her parents saw me as good association because I was always going to the meetings based off what they knew. They didn't hear anything bad about me. So, you know, they were like, okay. And then Giggles was kind of like gotten into trouble. That was another reason why she left high school early, was because she was getting into trouble. And her parents was like wanted her out, and so that she wouldn't be influenced by, you know, worldly people. And in the congregation, in the organization, they basically instilled that in us. Like since infancy, I remember like, yeah, don't go to college, don't try to pursue any super long type of educational course or dive into a passion that you want, because the end is coming and we need to get as many people as we possibly can to basically be saved from Armageddon. And so yeah, like her parents were definitely in that mindset and was instilling that mindset in her as well. And Giggles had a car. Her parents owned their own company, was like a franchise, and she was making her own money. She was going to work, working for her parents' company, and she'd like go out and field service. So she got to make her own work schedule. And so she would come pick me up. We would go out to dinner, hang out, whatever. Well, one occasion she had to get her car worked on. and she took me along with her. And there was this guy that was there. She knew him because he was there. He worked at that dealership, and she had been there a couple different times to get her car repaired before. And I remember her mentioning that. So that's how she knew of this guy. Here's this guy coming up to me, talking to me, saying like, hey, weren't you at that concert that happened last weekend or something like that, he said. And I was just like, no, I wasn't at a concert last weekend. And he was just like, oh my gosh, I thought you were that girl that I saw. And I was just like, okay. And he's still talking to me, and he's just like, you are so beautiful. Are you a model? And I was like, a model? No, I'm not a model. And then he was just like, wow, like he just giving me all these compliments and like, you know, saying things that I was not used to hearing. Like even like my high school boyfriend never said anything like that to me. Like I didn't grow up with, you know, the men in my family saying certain things like baby girl, princess, nothing like that. So here's this guy who's like saying that I'm beautiful and telling me I look like a model and calling me baby girl. And I was just eating that up. Like he's just caking all in my ear. I'm getting swooned, and I was liking it. And I was not really aware of how men will manipulate a girl into what the guy wants. Okay, like I did know like men only or guys only want one thing. Like I knew that, but I did not know that I just did not get it or understand the fact that a guy can, not all guys of course, not all men will do, well a man would never do that, but a guy or a boy, okay, will do things to manipulate a girl and persuade them into what they want, and they'll basically transform and become a whole different person or actor or become something that they think that you want, right? And so that's what this guy kind of did. He kind of like figured me out, and I wasn't very hard to figure out at the time. So this guy was just like, oh, this is easy, right? And so I was just easy prey. And I didn't have a phone, but I did have a flip phone where I was able to store numbers in and things like that. Got his number, and then like I would like text him on my friend's phone from school, or I would call him from the house phone when my parents weren't home, or just like try to reach out to him anytime that like I had access to a phone. I ended up getting into an argument with one of my parents, and I was really upset, and they couldn't understand, like they weren't being very considerate of my feelings at all, just totally disregarding my feelings, and they weren't putting themselves in my shoes. And I was just upset because they're just being so black and white about everything. And I was just sick of it. I was tired of it. And I called the guy, and like, I don't even want to give him a name, but I called him, or no, I didn't call him. I texted him, and I texted him and I said, hey, you know, I want to like go out. Do you think you can come pick me up? So I was already in habit of sneaking out to go visit like my high school boyfriend. And so I would sneak out the window in my bedroom and go off with my boyfriend a lot of times. But you know, that relationship ended. So this time I was like, well, let me call this guy me up, and he's just driving. And I'm like, well, where are we going? Because I didn't know where to go. And it was like in the middle of the night. And he was just like, well, I actually have to sign a contract with this artist I'm working with. And I was like, really? Like, I didn't even know he was doing anything like that. And so, because he really wasn't. And so he was like, well, I got to go to this hotel to like sign the contract. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not really dressed for that, because I was just wearing like a hoodie and like some shorts that I was wearing to sleep. We get to the hotel, and I'm like, this hotel, it was like one of those not an extended stay type of hotel, but like close to it. Like not a very nice hotel at all. He talks to the lady at the front desk, and then like he gets keys, and like I'm kind of like aloof and like checking out like la la la, like I'm not feeling like I'm in danger, you know, like I'm not paying attention. I'm not watching this guy or anything, because I just didn't think that I didn't do anything bad to him, so why would he do something bad to me? Like that was my mindset at the time. Like that's how I used to think. So we get into the room, and then I was like, well, you're gonna sign a contract here in a hotel room? Like I'm thinking like you could sign a contract like in a lobby of a hotel or something like that, but in a hotel room. He's like, and there was a table and a chair, 2 chairs there, and he was like, yeah, we're gonna do it like right here. But I'm like, I'm thinking about like the bed's right here, like that's just kind of weird. But okay. So he like turns on the TV and kind of like takes off his shoes and makes himself a little comfortable in the room. He started getting like aggressive, like physically aggressive, and like I'm like pulling away and things like that. And he starts initiating things, you know, and I was just like, no, I'm okay with, you know, certain things, but I'm not okay with like doing all that, like what you're leading to. And so unfortunately, I was taken advantage of that night. Okay. So I didn't know what to do in that type of situation, because I asked him to come get me. I went off with him. I went into that hotel room, but I didn't realize what he was doing. You see what I'm saying? And, you know, I felt like it was my fault. And after a point, I just gave in, because I didn't know how to defend myself that way, to that extent, after already physically defending myself for a period of time. And then eventually I just gave in. And being told, like after that happened, being told like, you did so good, you did a good job. And then it was just so confusing for me, because like I said, I wasn't getting the male attention like that. The things that he was saying, I was never spoken to like that. I was very easily swooned, and that's what led me into that situation. And I just didn't know how to feel, because I liked the guy, but I didn't like what happened and what he did. And so now I don't like him, but I was still trying to hold on to like what he was saying before and how I felt before. I didn't know I was raped. I thought because it was my fault. And rape doesn't look like, okay, you get snatched in the alley and you get beat and taken advantage of. Rape looks like other things, and I did not know that at the time. And so I was date raped, but I didn't know that term. I never even knew about that. And so like we left and he took me home, and I just was like quiet. I just got really numb. I called my high school friend, who was not a witness. She was just a girl that I hung out a lot with at school. And I told her, and I was just like, you know, I had sex. And she was like, what? No, you didn't. Like, she didn't believe me, because she knew how strong I was about my faith at the time. And she just was, you know, based off the things I was doing and saying, like, it didn't line up with me calling her and saying I had sex. Like, she didn't even believe me. So, you know, she's laughing and whatever. And I was kind of like, yeah, no, I did. And anyways, that conversation ended. So then I called Giggles, and I was like, Giggles, like, this is what happened. I had sex. And I just like broke down crying to her. And I was just like, I really, you know, didn't want to do it. And like, I don't know what to do. And she was just like, what? And like, she was like really upset. And then she started asking me questions like, did you use protection? And I was just like, no, like, I didn't even think about that. I was like, no. She was like, oh my gosh, Kirby, like, we got to see, like, if you're okay. And so she came up with a plan. She's like, we're going to go out in service this weekend together. And we're going to, like, meet with the group. And then we're going to say that we have, like, a return visit. And then we're going to go to, like, a clinic. So that's what we did. She took me up there and she paid for everything. And, you know, I ended up getting results. Like, everything came back negative, thank God. Like, we even called the guy. Like, I called the guy in three-way. No, I had her on the phone. I three-wayed the guy in, and, like, she, like, interrogated him and, like, you know, said some stuff and, you know, that kind of thing. Like I said, we were in high school. I just turned 18. And I was about to graduate. Like, I was like a month away from graduating when this all happened. Like, the memorial just happened. Like, all this was happening around the memorial. One of my parents ended up finding out. They went through my phone. They saw that I had the clinic's number in there. And I guess they were like, why would Kirby have a clinic's number in there? So they called the number, and of course they wouldn't tell them everything because of the simple fact that, like, the HIPAA Act or whatever, client, patient, you have to keep certain things private. So my parent came to me and told me, like, hey, I know this is what happened, and they drove me right to the clinic. Like, you need to go get these files and tell me what happened. I was terrified. Again, in a different way, because I just wanted to forget about it. I wanted to act like it never happened. But I didn't. I did it. I went and got the paperwork or whatever, and I showed them what happened, and I told them and explained. And of course, both my parents were very upset. So they wanted to approach Giggles because she's the one that took me up to the clinic. And because of me telling the story, I told them I met the guy because Giggles took me up there to the dealership, and that's how I met this guy. So, like, there's this whole conspiracy going on, like, oh, Giggles set her up with this, and she was bad association. She was trying to get my daughter to be involved with this guy. That was thrown out there, and, you know, some other stuff. And, like, Giggles was not, like, the best example. Like I said, she was half in and half out as a witness or whatever, but she was not conspiring to ruin me or have something like that happen to me. But that was put out there and said, like, you know, in front of her and her parents, because my parents and me went to her house and, like, talked about the whole situation with her parents and her there too. And you know, Giggles, she wanted me to say certain things that I was just not willing to say. Like, at this point, I was just like, no, let's just tell the truth. And, you know, one of my parents was just, you know, reading into things that weren't even there, kind of thing. And I was just basically like, this is just what happened. And yeah, yes, Giggles was involved because she took me to the clinic and made sure that I was okay and stuff like that. But because my other parent was saying, Giggles felt like I betrayed her, and I felt really bad about that. And I didn't really say a lot to help better that situation. Everything was just so intense. And already growing up in an intense household, and an intense religion, and this intense situation, and this traumatic, intense tragedy, it was just too much for me. Giggles went to her congregation, and I guess because her father was an elder, that had to get brought to her elders at her congregation. And my parents took me to the elders at my congregation, and they told, you know, I basically told them what happened. And so, like I said, because I wasn't baptized, I was put on public reproof, and because other people in the congregation knew about it, including Ashley, because I confided in Ashley as well. Ashley wasn't really around to witness anything, but she was just there during the time, like after I came from the clinic. I did confide in Ashley, and I told her what happened and things like that. Ashley was pretty upset about it, and the elders spoke to her as well. They questioned her about certain things, and, you know, I don't know what that conversation was like, but it was apparent that Ashley was not happy about anything that was going down on her end. And I can't remember correctly, but she might have actually been really upset with me too, possibly because of how Giggles got blamed basically for me getting involved with this guy. And so I lost a friend. I was there when I got announced. I sat in the main hall. I sat with my parents like I always did. And I just got to the point where if I didn't think about it and I didn't keep focusing on it, then I wouldn't feel bad anymore. And so I got to the point where I didn't let it bother me. So of course now, like, because I'm talking about it, thinking about it, you know, so I feel some type of way about it, but I definitely don't let that carry on into my life. I actually kind of forget that even happened. That was several years ago. So that was like back in 2006. It's 2022 today. That was my experience of getting announced. I could talk about more of my experiences if you guys are interested in that, so you can get a bit more of an insight of what it's like to grow up a Jehovah's Witness. I actually do want to share some of my friendships and things like that with the type of people who were my age and how they were as witnesses, because it wasn't good to worry about them because of the different things they got themselves involved with, because the amount of guilt and shame that they have basically gotten from the organization, feeling guilty for having certain feelings and even experimenting in certain things that the organization tells you not to do, because if you do it, then you have to get disfellowshipped, because most of the people that I was hanging around with were baptized, and they have been baptized for quite some time. They encourage people to get baptized at a young age, and as part of the brainwashing, and you know, they hold over basically the end is coming, and if, like, even they also say that even if you know better, this was the other thing that I felt like, even if you weren't baptized, like I wasn't at the time and hadn't been for quite some time, even if you grow up as a witness and you know what the Bible says and stuff like that, you still are held accountable by God, is what they would tell us in the congregation. Just because you're not baptized, you know better. It's not like you're a straight up worldly person who doesn't know the Bible, who doesn't know God, who doesn't know how to operate based off this organization and what Watchtower Society or the organization says how to move, right? They would say, like, you are still held accountable. And so I always thought about that, and I always felt like, even though I wasn't baptized, I was like, that doesn't mean I'm in the clear, and that bothered me. Like, I always thought about that. So especially for people who were actually baptized, who were in risk of getting disfellowshipped, on average, you were disfellowshipped for bare minimum 6 months. So that was like a real fear. And if you were living at home with your parents, you were at risk of getting kicked out. Some parents, you know, would let their children still stay there, but you're extremely neglected. And it's just like this energy that carries around you within the household and within your family that is just not good for anybody at all. It's not healthy. And that type of fear and shame and guilt leads people to do desperate things because you're operating at such a low vibrational energy, and low vibrational energies attract other low vibrational energy. And that's what was happening to me and to other people around me. And it was scary, very scary. And so I just feel like it's my responsibility to share my experiences and make people aware of certain things. So like if you are especially a woman who grew up a Jehovah's Witness and is now exiting, I don't care what age you are, you have to be careful if you haven't really been exposed to the world like that, because of how sheltered growing up as a Jehovah's Witness can be. And my parents, honestly, they weren't as strict as other Jehovah's Witness parents that I have witnessed. I was allowed to do certain things that other Jehovah's Witness kids were like just not allowed to do at all. Like even the thought of it was just like terrible. I'm just taking my experience to help other people. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you're interested, like and subscribe and write a comment. So, Kirby out.